Melbourne, Australia, August 2018. The front door crashes open. Australian Federal Police rush inside, boots hitting the floor, voices shouting orders. Upstairs, a 16-year-old boy wakes up in panic. His MacBook is still glowing on the desk. On it is merely 90 gigabytes of Apple's internal data, employee login details, encryption keys, pieces of source code, information that was never meant to leave Apple's systems. The folder holding it all has a strange name: Hacky Hack Hack. For nearly a year, someone had been inside Apple's network without permission, moving through servers, downloading files. No one noticed at first. Now international authorities are involved. The FBI, working with Australian Federal Police and Interpol, has been tracking the breach for weeks, and the trail has led here, to a quiet house in Melbourne. This wasn't about spying, it wasn't about revenge, and it wasn't about money. The boy had a different reason. He believed that if Apple saw what he could do, they might hire him. So how did a teenager manage to get inside one of the most secure companies in the world? And why risk everything just to prove he could do it? Let's put this into perspective. Apple runs one of the most tightly controlled technology systems in the world. Thousands of engineers work on products protected by multiple layers of security. Access to internal tools is restricted. Development servers are closely monitored. Every login is recorded. But even strong monitoring has limits. When millions of actions happen across a global network every day, unusual activity can slip through, especially if it looks like normal behavior. And at first, that's exactly what happened. Sometime in 2017, someone managed to get inside Apple's internal network. The access didn't immediately raise alarms. The activity blended in with normal traffic moving through the system, which meant the person behind it wasn't simply guessing passwords or launching random attacks. They understood how the system worked. For months, the access continued quietly. Files were downloaded, internal tools were opened, data left Apple's network without triggering immediate warnings. Eventually, Apple's security team noticed unusual patterns in the logs. They began reviewing the activity more closely. What they discovered was serious. Someone had been inside their internal systems for months. Apple reported the breach to US authorities, and the FBI began tracing the activity. The digital trail eventually led investigators to Australia. That's when Australian Federal Police became involved, and the investigation led them to a suburban house in Melbourne. Inside that house was not a criminal gang or a foreign spy. It was a high school student. A teenager spends most of his time in his bedroom. Posters on the walls, school books in the corner, a desk covered with cables and computer parts. In the middle of it all, a laptop screen glowing late into the night. The boy sitting there is 16. His name was never made public. Australian law protects the identity of minors, so court records and news reports never revealed who he was. But investigators later learned a few things about him. He was mostly self-taught, curious, and very good with computers. He didn't come from a wealthy background. He didn't attend a famous tech school. There were no connections to Silicon Valley, just a teenager with internet access and a lot of time spent learning how computer systems work. He was especially interested in Apple, not just the products, but the technology behind them, the software, the systems that kept Apple's network secure. He wanted to understand how it all worked, and, eventually, he hoped to work there. But at 16, there was no clear path to a job like that. No degree, no professional experience, no way to get inside a company like Apple. So he kept learning on his own. He studied how servers communicate, how login systems verify users, how security tools detect unusual activity. He also learned something important. Even strong systems sometimes have weak points. By late 2017, he began testing what he had learned. At first, the activity was small. Quiet checks, watching how systems responded, seeing how data moved across networks. Gradually, those tests became more serious. He started finding ways to imitate trusted users and move through parts of the system that should have been restricted. Then sometime in late 2017, he managed to do something very few outsiders ever achieve. He got into Apple's internal network, and at first, no one noticed, so he kept going. Now, let's go back to that morning. August 14th, 2018. Early morning in a quiet Melbourne neighbourhood. A convoy of unmarked vehicles pulls up outside a suburban house. Australian Federal Police step out, wearing body armour. They move quickly to the front door. They don't knock. The door bursts open. Police, search warrant. Boots pound through the hallway. Lights switch on. A mother screams. A father steps out of his room, confused and terrified. Upstairs, the boy wakes to shouting. His bedroom door swings open. Officers rush in, flashlights pointed toward the bed. Within seconds, he's pulled up and his wrists are secure. His MacBook is still open on the desk. One of the officers walks straight toward it. Gloves on, evidence bag ready. The screen is still on. Inside the computer is a folder called Hacky Hack Hack. Investigators begin copying the drive, file by file. Nearly 90 gigabytes of Apple's internal data. Around the room, other officers start searching. Drawers open, closets checked, external drives and USB sticks collected. Everything is labeled and packed as evidence. Downstairs, the boy's parents sit in shock. An officer explains what's happening. Their son is suspected of breaking into Apple's internal systems and downloading confidential data. The search is being carried out under Australia's Cybercrime Act. The mother goes pale. The father struggles to understand what he's hearing. Upstairs, the boy sits on the edge of his bed while officers continue searching his room. Within minutes, his laptop and other devices are sealed in evidence bags. When the search is finished, officers lead him downstairs. Outside, neighbors have started to gather. Some are watching from their windows. Others are recording on their phones. A police car waits at the curb. The boy is placed in the back seat. As the car pulls away, he looks back at the house. Just hours earlier, it was the place where he spent most of his time learning, experimenting, and building his skills. Now, investigators are still inside. The boy was charged under Australia's Cybercrime Act. Investigators accused him of breaking into Apple's systems and downloading confidential company data. Because he was a minor, his identity was never made public. His name and face were kept out of the media, and the case was handled in a juvenile court. Apple never publicly discussed the full details of the breach. Behind the scenes, the company worked with investigators while its security teams reviewed the incident and strengthened internal systems. The teenager was not sent to prison. Instead, the court placed him on a good behavior bond. He was ordered to complete community service and attend counseling. His computers and storage devices were permanently seized. He avoided adult prison by a matter of months. If he had been slightly older, the charges could have carried far more serious penalties. Apple never offered him a job. There was no dramatic redemption story, just the legal consequences of what he had done. The case faded from public attention fairly quickly. But inside Apple, it became an example used by security teams studying how the breach happened. The incident forced a review of internal monitoring systems and access controls across the company.